We have 24 hours before the voting starts. It's the first primary since Iowa was a caucus. Is Mitt Romney the front runner still, and if so, by how much?
And all the polls have him up, 19, 20%. It's really pretty much a certainty whether he'll win. The suspense here is twofold. There's one, who will come in second place, and will that second place finisher have a real sort of sense of momentum? And there's some interesting. It now seems that Huntsman might possibly be that person. Ron Paul is still holding strong. The other bit of suspense is, will Mitt Romney, how low might he fall? And will he set a new low record by winning with the lowest percentage threshold that anybody's ever won New Hampshire? And that's also possible. He might even conceivably not beat himself from 4 years ago, which, even though he would win, would also be sort of humiliating if he were to actually fall below, say, 32%.
Neil, there were a couple of debates over the weekend, first Saturday evening, then Sunday morning. We heard a lot from the candidates. Did that hurt Mitt Romney's chances? Is that why his numbers are falling? And are the numbers that you're referring to just among New Hampshire, likely Republican voters, or are they nationwide?
No, those polls I was talking about were just New Hampshire. The debate, the Saturday debate was extremely gentle on him. The Sunday morning debate was a totally different story. Everyone started piling up on him. It could be what's affecting these tracking poll numbers. And then, people have really started to lay into his record at Bain Capital, which is really at the heart of his campaign, and that could begin to bite.
And Neil, we have an in-depth story in the Journal today. Mark Merrimont takes a look at all of the investments that Bain Capital has made and how they have done. And the real question, there are a couple of questions. The first, of course, is sort of this broader question of whether private equity is good for business, good for America. And secondly, was Bain Capital itself good at these investments? Did it have a good track record? And Neil King, we hear from Mitt Romney on the campaign trail. He often talks about Staples, Domino's Pizza. But the story today does suggest that there was a failure rate of something like 30%, depending on how you define it, of the businesses that Bain invested in.
There's that, yeah, which, one can say what you will about that. And then there are just the faces of the people who lost their jobs and the stories, which I think will be particularly potent going forward, which now Newt Gingrich and I'm hearing Rick Perry are going to start leveling with some big cash behind them in South Carolina, of stories that went bust, where the pensions and other things disappeared, and where Romney and the people at Bain walked off with, multi-million-dollar management fees. So you start putting that narrative out there, especially when it's being put out by Republicans, and there's a big group supporting Gingrich that's going to put almost $3.5 million into ads in South Carolina, hammering on the Bain issue.
Hey, Neil, New Hampshire has a history and likes to pride itself on being unpredictable. Does that play positively for somebody like Huntsman, who's gone sort of all in New Hampshire, and perhaps the voters there would even appreciate that effort?
You would think, and that right there is the whole of his campaign. But I think he's been to like 170 events here. He's essentially lived here, and finally he's crawling into the mid-teens in the polls. There's certainly, it would be staggering if he actually were to win in the end.
Right.
And
is there
will
a number,
second place do him enough?
Is there a number that the pundits say that he's got to get to be, a legitimate contender or even to continue?
Yeah, I think that if he were to be second or close second and show real upswing, and then any sense in national polls that people have taken notice. I mean, this is still an incredibly crowded field. I would be willing to say more people are going to go into South Carolina to campaign there than, any time recently. There were a lot in 08, but this is going to be very crowded because everyone's waiting around to see if they can be the last guy to go up against Romney because the support is so tepid.